Welcome back to Rich Lessons Podcast. We are finally in season 2. We hope you have stuck around this long and are enjoying what we're giving. You know, Sheena, I think
Yes.
this is like a labor of love and passion from both of our sides.
It is. I mean, season 1 was absolutely amazing. Great feedback, knowing like what to change or we're gonna do more of. And so super, super excited to be here in season 2 and also more guests in season
Yes.
2.
So our big goal, for this season is to have more guests. So I am extremely excited to have someone that I endearingly call Ace, and everyone else does, Coleman. She is a extraordinary event and wedding planner. She was my wedding planner, so you already know.
She's gonna be my wedding planner in the next
She did
some years.
try to book for the future. But you already know she is top grade. She does what needs to be done. She is the planner extraordinaire. And I'm really fortunate to have her. And you may not know this, but you're our first live guest. And so excited to have you here in the studio with us to talk about the business of wedding planning. Now, I have your bio here, but I would love for you to take us back into your career and how this all started. How did you get into wedding planning?
So I got into wedding planning actually on a corporate side. So I was doing events for university, which turned into assisting with reunions, class parties, parties at the alumni house that they had. And so, experiences has always been my thing. And then just I'm a lover's girl. And so that's kind of how I dabbled into weddings. My first wedding was actually my husband's best friend's wife. And so I was like, look, I think this is what I want to do. Let me, do this for you. Nothing free of charge. Let me do everything. Let me just see if this is something I really want. Because you really don't know until you dive into it. And so that's how I dived into it. And she was my first client, and I put processes in place and treated her like a client. And that is history. So I always tell her it began with you. Like you are it. So someone gave me a shot to just see if I wanted it. And I was like, okay, yeah, I love this. I can do this. And so that's how we got started.
So I'm just going to start off with jumping into my wedding.
Yeah. That's fine.
People still to this day are like, when we talk about the wedding,
It was the wedding.
whether you're in New York, whether you are in DC, people already know what wedding they are talking about. And I don't know if in my head what was delivered was going to be so grand,
Mhm.
right? Because to me, I was like, okay, here's the vision.
That was the vision. That's all we had. It was
That's
a
just what I
picture.
wanted. Like, this is the vision that I have. But the execution of it just was so great to people.
I'm curious because the wedding was amazing. I actually think I tweeted this at the time when it was still Twitter. I was like, by far the best wedding I've ever been to in my life. Like amazing. So I'm curious though, when you guys came together, when she gave you that vision, was it like this girl's crazy?
No,
It was one picture.
Oh, it was just
It
one
was
picture.
one picture. It was one picture. And she said, I want this. And I remember telling her, I was like, you will have something better than this. Like, I remember telling her, I was like,
Yes.
because of course, I'm not going to copy anyone else's work. So I was like, it's going to be better than this. And I think that we did. I think that it took a minute to go there. We'll kind of dive a little deeper into that process, but we made it happen, and I think that was just the pivotal time for me as well in my career to know, like, you got to do what you got to do to get it done. So that's how
I had
things
no
came to fruition. So
one picture.
one picture.
Yes.
So it was
So
like a little video.
we met a few years before because you were the wedding planner for my line sister,
Correct.
Lindsay.
Correct.
And so I reached out to Lindsay. I was just on people to see, like, who do you recommend? Would you recommend your wedding planner? And she was like, yes, she stayed on top of things. And, she runs a tight ship. I recommend her. And so we talked to a few wedding planners and we were like, yeah, we're going to go with Ace, Elegance by Ace. And we jumped on a call. I was in New York. This is when I was splitting my time between New York and New Orleans. And so I was like at my office in New York. We jumped on a phone call. Austin was like some running around
Running around. Yeah.
with Saint Hog doing what he does. And I got to explain this vision that I want, like this tenant wedding, which isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do because you have to find the right location. But Austin was very specific about the locations that he wanted, which was like St. Louis Cathedral. Now, other thing, right? We got engaged on like Labor Day weekend in 2022. We got married
6 months.
yeah, like April of the next year. So people don't realize that this wasn't no drawn. People think we were planning for like a year, and we didn't really start for real, probably until like
Late December.
late December. And so the way we went about getting our venues is that I was like, Austin, he was like, I want to do St. Louis Cathedral. I was an altar boy there. I was like, first of all, I actually didn't want to do St. Louis Cathedral at first because I'm not Catholic. And so I was like, really? But he was like, I was an altar boy. I really want to get married at St. Louis Cathedral. I was like, you know what? If you could get St. Louis Cathedral when basically
6 months and all of the
out,
stipulations.
when people literally have this venue booked for 2 years out, then we'll do St. Louis Cathedral. And so he called St. Louis Cathedral. You know, they're all a part of the archdiocese and it's all connected. And the woman who runs all their events, actually her brother or someone played baseball with him as a kid. So it was just like some random scenario. And she was like, oh, I think we're booked. Well, let me check. And so just so happened a couple had moved their wedding to a different venue and they hadn't removed it from the books yet. And so they were like, yeah, we actually have this time frame on that date.
Wow.
It only was there because somebody forgot to remove it from the books, right? And so that's how we got St. Louis Cathedral. And then Noma came about because Austin sits on the board at Noma. And so, you know, he like, oh, I could probably get this little discount from sitting on the board. But I'm thinking about the tent. So I'm like, will we be able to do this?
Where are we going
tent?
to put this tent?
And so the idea of like trying to figure out how do we coordinate this effort. But even before we jump into that, one thing that always stood out to me about you, Ace, is your organization. And, you know, you have like all the tools, you run a type ship. I never had to reach out to you. You're always on top of me. And so have you just always been that organized? And what is your thought process when day one, when a bride reaches out to you and say, yes, let's move forward?
So day one, I mean, it has changed because before it used to be, okay, let's start the process. So now it's onboarding, right? So we need to onboard. We need to talk about, let's dive deeper into this past consultation. Because typically you have your consultation, you tell me your dreams, your visions, you know, I'm listening just as they're interviewing me, I'm interviewing them to make sure we're a good fit. So that has to be. And then you go into your onboarding. And with the onboarding, that's where we're diving in a little bit deeper. Guest count, expectations, what you're visioning, what you want, what you don't like. I went to this wedding. I didn't want to do this. You know, let me know. I'm not offended. Let me know because I want to make sure that I'm giving you your wedding of your dreams. And so we start there. But then as I have from the beginning, I have to be organized. It's a lot of clients. So I have tools in place. So I have online platforms that I use. So I set it up. Once I do that, I onboard the clients with it. That's what they utilize to kind of see budgets, kind of see the time flow. They can see our scheduling on making sure we're meeting the benchmarks to get things done. So no one, like if I'm not available, you have something to go and look at. It's no excuse why. But I also give my clients the accountability. Yes, this is what I do. I'm your planner, but it's your wedding. It's your wedding. And so I want you to be involved. And involving is saying yes and, you know, giving okays because at the end of the day, it's your wedding. So we're not going to look back here and say, well, I didn't know about this. You knew about everything. So for me, I'm just big on time management. And that's how I've been able to do these weddings in 6 months, proposals in 3 days, you know, but you just have to be able to have that time management in place and that makes your clients feel comfortable. And I deal with a lot of professionals, so they don't have the time to try to juggle this whole process. That's why you get a planner to make sure that you're on top of things and no, I'm not going to harass you. I know you're busy. So if I'm going to communicate with you, I'm going to send you probably like one email and it's going to have everything in it. It's not going to be too much of words, but it's going to be enough for you to bullet point what needs to be done because I can't answer it all. Like, I need a guest list from you. We'll probably dive into that a little bit. But, so it's different things that I just cannot do. What I can do, I will do. But the things that they have to be accountable for, that allows for that to happen. So I think you just have to have a good relationship with the couple, I think sets the tone for everything. And so I think we were able to do that up front. Savitra was very busy. So, sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I haven't heard from her for a while. And I'm like, I'm just checking in. What's going on?
All my deadlines passed.
I was like, what's going on? And
I'm curious though, but clearly, you got a chance to know who she was. But is that something for you as a wedding planner that in some cases you're just like, yeah, no, this is not gonna work with this person. It's a no for me.
no, honestly not.
Okay.
No, I mean, because that's what
Is
what
there
I
any
do.
deal breakers for you? It's like, yep, nope.
I'm type A. So type A and type A does not go well together. But it depends. And I've had a type A situation and I just knew it wasn't going to turn out well. And it ended up being like one of the great relationships that I had, one of the best wedding processes that I had. But it was a lot of like questioning me, am I doing this right? Like, I know I'm supposed to, but they're also type A as well. But it ended up being well through the planning process. So I mean, I think Austin kind of took over a little bit because she was busy, as well. So, we gave him some tasks and he didn't mind doing it. Like,
Oh, he loves it.
he
He
loves,
talks about.
we had a
Does he
great
say I plan the wedding?
No, I think he is very proud that he picked the venue.
picked the venue.
He had the band,
Mhm.
so some of the touches that people saw was like
Mhm.
his doing and him leaning on his relationships.
Mhm.
Like our bar was completely sponsored
Mhm.
by Duce because of his relationships. And so he definitely was involved.
Yeah, he definitely was involved, and he definitely picked up. And it was really not just slacking. It's just her demand at her job at the time, kind of kept her like traveling and moving around a lot. And so he was able to step in and it should be that way. It shouldn't just fall on one person. And so he totally stepped in and helped. He was here locally, so was able, we were able to get some things done and keep some things moving. Of course, they had to have their conversations on photography, videography,
Yeah.
make, those decisions together. But, she trusted him, he trusted her. And so they were able to do with or without or behind the scenes or whatever. It got done.
Yeah.
So that's what I care about the most. And so, yeah, we didn't have any no
Okay.
issues.
Yes. Now, I have a question, and even so, this is a very controversial part of wedding planning,
Let's go.
and that is budgets.
Investments.
And
I call it
I
investments.
like that. Investments,
yes,
not
investing in the
budgets. I like
future,
that.
investing in memories. I like that too. But there is not a day that goes by on social media where somebody said, I would never pay this much money for a wedding. You could spend it on this. Well, luckily for me, I got to do all those things, right? I didn't have to not go on honeymoon. Like, I think you do what's in your means to
Within
do.
your, what
Right.
else to do.
And so Ace is very upfront. She was like, you gonna give me the vision and I'm gonna tell you this gonna cost.
Yeah.
And if you don't have this to put against it, then it's probably not gonna happen. But I would love for you to talk about what do you have couples and brides think about when they talk about budgets and what's realistic. I'm sure you probably have to reel people back in often.
Often.
And weddings have become just more expensive. Everything is more expensive. Right.
Yeah, it's expensive. So, that's always like a touchy conversation. I end all consultations with that because I don't want to start with that and then people kind of like down their vision. Let me hear what you want. Let me see where we are. The good thing is I've been doing it long enough. I have the relationships. I know what it costs. So 9 times out of 10, they're pulling something from my Instagram, my website. You're looking at, or you're on Pinterest, or you're looking at these high-end other event planners or event companies. And so I have to reel it in because reality, you say, oh, we spent this, and you go on a knot.com. Well, that's the wrong place for you to look if you're looking to do a luxury wedding. The knot.com is going to kind of give you kind of the modest tone of what to expect to spend. But if you're looking at something that's heavy floral, lighting, guest count is always the conversation, because the more guests, the more people you put in a seat, that's the more that your event is going to cost. And that doesn't often equate, and people tend to not think about that way. And I think Savitra and I had this conversation. You have to look at it. It's not just what you're paying per person for the meal. Take that whole event cost, that's your per person cost. So if it's $1,500 a person, that's what it costs, because you're decorating, you got tables, you got chairs, you have linen. All of that is the per person cost. Yes, it's about you and your husband or your wife at that moment, but you're inviting people to your wedding. So it's an experience. So that is what you're paying for this person to come to, your event. And so that is often a tough conversation, and people are like, are people really spending, or is this what it really costs? And it's not really me. It's not me making up the numbers. It's what it costs. It's what it costs. Florals are very expensive, even more so now with the tariffs going up. Flowers are not grown in the U.S. like that. We're getting them from Ecuador and, various different places. So you have to get those things shipped in. A lot of people are working, so labor is more money to, get those, how can I say, to get those events executed in time. And you have to make sure you have the right vendors. I can't just get someone with just a 2-person team to execute this large event. So it's a lot of different variables that go into it. It is definitely a tough conversation, but I think you have to educate your client on it along the way. And that's the biggest thing that I do. So before we even dive in, okay, you have your venues, but let me educate you on this. So I did it for you. Let's do a budget analysis. Let's see what it's going to cost you to have an event there. I do it over and over so I know what it costs, but sometimes you need to see that breakdown, photography, videography, everything lined out, line item, because those couple $1,000s add up to big numbers. And then once you see it, it's like, okay, it's a tough pill to swallow. Am I looking to spend that? Absolutely, I'm not. But this is what you're seeing on these photos that you're sending to me.
Yeah.
And it's the quality. I'm big on quality. So I've worked well with getting quality vendors to be able to execute these visions. That's important. I just can't use anyone, because not everybody's going to be able to have those details. I can't be everywhere. So I have to trust that the vendors that I work with, if I step away, I have to be able to get it done. Or if there's an issue, which you know about that, if there's an issue, I need to trust that you're going to fix that issue immediately, and not like, oh, I'm sorry, like this is our
Because that falls back on you.
Yes.
At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It falls back on me. Whether I make a recommendation or whether a client picks someone to do the job, it falls back on me, because I have to make sure that these individuals uphold to the deliverables that they contracted. So that's why trying to stick to the vendor recommendation list is plus. But when, people like, oh, my friend used this one, it's tough. It's tough because if they don't deliver and you're having a certain expectation, at the end of the day, I can't guarantee, or I can't fix that. Like I can't hound them for that. So not saying you have to use who I put forth, but it's in your best interest to do that. So investments are a big.
What is the average investment today for a wedding?
Like it's all over the place, but I am curious. Like, what is the average people spending with?
That average, for what I do, I'm gonna stick in my lane.
Right.
So,
for a luxury wedding.
For a luxury wedding, I mean, I had to put a minimum in place. So a minimum wedding right now is, for me, is between 95 to 150. That's like on the surface. Now, once we start putting in those bells and whistles, those numbers grow. That number sounds not realistic to a lot of people, but that's what it costs. You're seeing this. This is what people are spending. This is what they are doing. Now, if your wedding is not as elaborate, or if your guest count is not that much, then maybe, that number can come down a little bit. Guest count, again, that drives the cost. But even if you have a lower guest count, it doesn't matter. Your vision is your vision, so it's still going to cost.
Right. What was the number again? What was the investment?
Between like 90 and 150 is like her range to do a luxury.
5 years from now, I can't eat.
You got it. Anyways, what I always have to laugh about is that people, I'm like, I got married in 1997.
It's not
I spent $8,000 on my wedding. That include the DJ, the food. I'm like, honey, well, that was congratulations.
I'm so glad you
For
were
you.
able to have it.
And that's why I was with 19. That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm like, 5 years from now, man.
Oh, you talking about the price?
Yeah, I'm like, for 5 years from now, then
The price will
good.
go up,
Yeah.
And so it's just reality. And again, if you want like a $30,000 wedding, then I think that that's what you should do. But the likelihood of you having a $30,000 wedding with 200 guests, I'm just trying to think like in what, even the smallest wedding.
Yeah, the smallest wedding. I mean, food, drinks, that's
Yes.
the biggest part of it.
I go back and forth between like, I'm going to go to the courthouse or do I want a huge wedding? Now, it probably has changed now. I'm giving you a little bit. So when I come to you in 5 years, you know, you kind of already know. I used to want a huge wedding. I used to want to have a wedding so big to the point that I would say, I'm just going to like randomly drive down the street. And like, even if I see a homeless person, like, what are you doing tomorrow?
You just want
If
people
you're not
to
doing,
experience.
if you're not doing anything tomorrow,
Nah, that's crazy.
come on over. Getting married over here, you are welcome. You have lots of food. But now I'm kind of like, I don't want to go to like the
You
courthouse.
could also have something in the middle too, you know?
Yeah, you could have in the middle.
Well, the problem's got way too many family members, and I feel like it's just not going to. Yeah, unless we're gonna bring like Popeye's chicken in, I'm gonna be spending $200,000.
You're not bringing in Popeye's
Right.
chicken.
She's like, pick somebody else because
Because do destination weddings because they know that some people won't be able to fly.
I was going to say
And
that.
so they'll do a destination wedding, and that will essentially automatically get rid of people who would just never fly
They would
to
never.
come see, the wedding. And so that's one way people are able to control their lists and reduce prices too, because it's probably cheaper to get married. Now, not cheaper for the guests though, because the guests end up spending
They end up
all the
spending on the
money.
back end.
To get there, which is why so many people don't go because they can't afford to. So I think there's just so many different ways to have a ceremony or have a wedding that's authentic to you. And I felt like I did what was authentic to me. And I've never been a person that dreamed about getting married, right? I've never like fantasized about my wedding. However, as you know, when I do something, I want to give people experience.
grand.
And that's my thing.
I want them to be like, oh, I remember this as much as you remember it, and it was your wedding. And I just want people to have a good time. I want people to eat well, drink well. And make it worth their trip to New Orleans in this
Absolutely.
case. And I feel like that was the goal, and I think we accomplished that. Now, you talked about vendors and the importance of vendors. I also feel like we lucked up by being able to get our vendors for that date. It must have been.
It was
It's
definite for sure. We didn't have any
So many
seconds.
vendors fell into place for us, and everybody showed up. And you mentioned that we had like one. I feel like every wedding has like one
We have
hiccup
some
that most people
incident.
don't realize, but because you're in it, you kind of see it. And that was like our
The AC and the
AC vendor. And so you may or may not know this or realize this, and most people didn't because they were like everything was flowing, and like the
We were
pre-reception.
comfortable and
Yeah, the reception was like flowing. Everybody just loved it. But we were a little late to the dinner because our tent wasn't cooling fast enough, right? And I know this is very much so like first world problems, but hey, we in the first world, so we can
I just thought y'all taking pictures somewhere. I was like, oh, okay.
yeah, we were doing that too.
We were. That was what we were doing. That's what we were doing. And I stalled the room reveal because I'm like, guys, it is warm in here. Like,
Yes.
what's going
Yes.
on in the tent? So one of the AC units kept like overriding itself and clicking off. And so it wasn't like cooling. I mean, I read Austin's face as soon as he walked in.
He walked in, he was like, it's warm up in here.
And I'm like, I know, like, I'm working on it. Like, I don't know what happened. So they're taking their pictures and he's just looking at me like, what are we about to do? Like, after this is dinner. Like, what's happening here? And I'm like, I know, like, we're working on it. But that all goes into being able to use vendors that you trust because they were bringing in a new unit. They were bringing in different things. To cool it, mind you, the day before it was cooling, all during production it was cooling.
Just right
Soon
when
as it was time for them to walk into the tent, all of a sudden and it's April, right? So now it's starting to get warm. It's a clear tent.
Yes.
And, we're warned about those things. Clear tent is like plastic.
The
So
sun.
sun shining dead on plastic. That made it hot. If it was maybe a white tent, probably would have been okay.
Yes.
But because it was a clear tent, we had even covered the top of the tent. We did all of the precautions to make sure we kept this tent at a comfortable temperature. But it's like soon as we took that plastic off of the top of the tent in that sunshine just for that little bit, it
warmed
just
up.
warmed up so fast. That's out of my control. Is it acceptable? Absolutely not. It's not acceptable. However, that's when having the right vendors come into play
Mhm.
because they were able to rectify it, get someone out, put some other things into play to make it cool. And I think by the time they
got in
walked
there,
in, and
it
by
was
the time the
cool.
guests walked in, there were
Nobody.
no signs.
Yeah.
It was so cold. People
People were
pushed.
like, were saying
They
it was too
they were
cold.
like, it's too cold. They had to push the vents back underneath the tent, like the little tube that the AC, the ducts. They had to push the ducts out of the tent because it was cold. But I'd rather you be cold than hot, right?
Mhm.
But no one knew that was going on besides those
Yeah.
individuals we had a conversation with. The couple knew, unfortunately. That was the last thing I
Yeah,
wanted
they were
them to
like, "It's
experience.
warm up here."
Like,
We were
I'm
like,
like, I know,
"Gotta
and
fix this."
they're taking their pictures, and we're having a conversation like it shouldn't be like all of this that we did to make sure it shouldn't be. I'm like, I am on it. Like we are
You on
working
it.
it out. Like I am on it. And
Yes.
I reassure them like it will not be like that. And by the time
Yes.
those guests walked into that reception, you would have not known that that's what we were dealing with like 20 or 30 minutes
Yeah.
prior to.
And honestly, on the bigger scheme of things, it was minor because our the individual that's the manager at Noma told us the week before they had a wedding, and they had a wedding in that area, and they didn't put floors down, and it stormed.
It stormed.
And so it basically flooded their entire tent. And so it was like, their whole space was ruined.
It was
People
ruined.
couldn't
They
really
couldn't
go
do
out there.
anything.
And so I was like, in comparison to what could happen.
Could have happened, yeah.
Although we had floors down, but that was a part of the conversation because all those additional things, cost money. And so some people go without floors because it's cheaper to just sit everybody on the grass. Whereas we were like, oh no, we definitely probably need to put this flooring
Level it
in.
down.
Right there, so with heels and all that.
Yes,
shit.
exactly. And so we had like this concept where, and I also tell people like I didn't do an engagement party, I didn't do a bridal shower, somebody like surprised me. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do everything on this one day, and we're gonna just have like essentially 3 events in one, or technically 4 events
in one.
in one day, which we did, and I think that they all ran, back to back to back. And were like succinct and everything like moved along. And the day just goes by so fast.
It does.
And I will go back to the tent because the tent is actually, for better or for worse, restricted us to our guest count. And so most people think like, oh, they weren't invited because of this and that. And we were like, yeah, we literally just do not have
the capacity.
And Ace actually made more space.
I made more space, and I don't know how I made more space. I'm like, guys, we do not have the space. And because Austin was like, I know we can get like just a few more. Like, can we?
And that's so Austin.
Yeah, he was like, he
was the problem.
He was like, a few more. Like, I have to. I'm just like, okay. And so like, but this is where you have to have that team, right? And so I'm like, okay, I know what I could do within those parameters. Now let me go to the people that have to build this and
build it.
put this in. So I did have conversations with them, and they was like, okay, if you do this, then we can do that. Or we're going to have to make the stage a little, smaller, but we have to be able to accommodate this. So, there were some things that we had to talk about, like with lighting or audio visual and sound. They have to have a setup within the tent. Well, I was like, that's not going to work. So you got to put some of this stuff outside. Changing.
So what comes first with that? Because you brought her a vision, and then you said, I'm going to make this even better. When you bring that vision, do you also bring the count, or do you take that vision and say, well, if you want this to be this way, like how does that?
So I told you like, okay, we're planning for this number, but then the number
the
started to
number
grow.
changed, like, and it didn't change 25, 50. it
Yeah.
changed because I think we were supposed to be like 200, 250. And I
Yes.
just looked at their stuff. It was like 320.
It was like 325.
Oh.
Austin again. Austin had a problem.
Like we were 200, 250 comfortably, whatever. Like we would not have had those problems,
Yes.
like trying to figure that out. Because whatever was going to fit in there with all of her expectations of what she wanted, it totally would have worked.
Mhm.
But when you started adding the people in there, then I have to change layout because I think we ended up changing the layout.
We did change the layout.
How far, because it was only 6 months, how far into it did the guest list change?
Oh, this was like
we were working this up
2
into
weeks, like week
2 weeks,
before.
week of
Yeah.
taking people out, putting people in, changing
Oh.
things around. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
but that's common for a seated dinner. But the list itself grew. I mean, once we sent out invitations, that the list just grew. You think people are not going to come? They're coming. It's New Orleans.
Yes.
They are coming.
Yes. I think we had how many? So we had like 6 people not show, I believe.
Mhm.
But just tell all the people out there who are future guests who have not had a wedding. Because honestly, I am conscious of this now. If I get invited to a wedding, to go or to give the couple enough vans where they can invite somebody else.
Yeah.
We were emailing people the day before, the night before. If you cannot make it,
Yeah. We were
please
very
let us
clear.
know. Because there are people that we still probably could have invited like 2 days before who would have loved
Who
to
would have loved
attend.
to attend?
And so to just not show up at a wedding, right?
Rude.
It's rude, but also it goes back to like we paid for
paid.
every seat because it was a seated dinner and we bought favors. You saw them in wet bottles. You like every single
Wait,
person
no, they just
we
skip
paid
past
for.
that real quick. Just don't skate by that. Like we get there, I'm just like, are those Moet bottles for every single guest? Okay, now you can skate. Right? You just said that so fast, like it was just like a normal, like wedding favor that you have for every guest with
Yes.
our name on it.
So I don't know. Some people got our invitations and they immediately was like, oh, this
Go
wedding
with-
will be nice. And then maybe some people got the invitations and thought, it's just a regular wedding. I don't know.
The invitation wasn't a regular invitation, so they
Right.
would not have
Right.
possibly thought it was a.
Some people got a wedding invitation and they were like, we got you a better gift
Mhm.
because of your
of
wedding
the-
invitation.
Because the expectation.
Yes.
I always say that invitation depicts what they're coming to.
That's why I say they couldn't have possibly thought it was a normal wedding, because the invitation I get lots of wedding invitations. That was not the average wedding invitation. That was, I don't know which one that was or Austin, but that was it let you know you was coming to an event.
You're coming to an event.
Yes. And Ace always like, more than anything, which is why I think wedding planners are important, particularly if you're like busy, like Austin and I are, she always gave us options. Like, hey, here's some options. Like, because often people are like, oh, who should I get for this? Who should I get? What should I get? I like options. I like to be able to say 1, 2, 3. All right, 2. Let's go
That's
with
how
2.
we did. Mhm.
And so it was more like that, which made it easier for me because I was able to like sit down and have options in front of me. But yes, let's go back to
Yes.
the importance of guests coming to weddings or properly giving enough time to say they're not coming.
Yes. I mean, it's rude. As I stated before, it's rude. If you do not let the individuals that are inviting you to the wedding know that you're not going to make it, because they do have a long list of people who want to attend. I mean, now people doing A list, B list, so that if something happens, then they can put someone into that spot. So you're paid for. You say, yes, I'm planning for you to be there. I'm making sure whatever you need to have the experience is put into place. So when you do not do that, that's money wasted when you don't show up. Not necessarily that I'm looking for you to bring me a gift, but I paid for you to be there. So, we do understand things arrives. And they were really good with, because I did a lot of the emailing to guests. You probably received those emails. Like, if anything changes, please let us know. We understand. Like, we reiterated it so much. I've never done that before in my career. Sent out that, like we went to, when we sent out invitations, and up until like every week, until like every day, up until like, if anything changes,
the night
please
before.
please let us know. We understand things happen. But it's also because, and it doesn't matter. I mean, whether you have a $75,000 wedding or if you're having a $250,000 wedding, it's the proper thing to do. Or more or less even respond, because you also get people that do not respond. It wasn't their case, but that does happen. People do not respond and they just show up. Like, we can't do that. So you want to be able to plan accordingly, because what ends up happening is you do plan for the people that come, but then when someone does not respond, then you're trying to scramble and feel like, how can I accommodate that person? That's not the experience that you don't want to get, but they're expecting to get the same experience of those who did the right thing to say that they were coming. So it's important to do it. It's a lost art, but I mean, it's important to just respond. It's nothing wrong with saying no. We understand. I mean, we're probably looking for some no's.
Thank you. Right. Thank
We're
you.
looking for some thank you so much. You know, we're looking for some no's, because people do over invite, because just because you invite 200 people do not mean all 200 are going to come. But New Orleans, they're coming.
We
especially
invited 200 people and all them
200
people
plus.
said they was coming. They
The people who wasn't in New Orleans was like, I am coming. 'Cause I was definitely like, I will be there.
I have to be there.
I think a lot of our tech friends that they came back,
I mean,
like, we
people
didn't
called
care.
me and was like, can I come?
Mhm.
And so I was like, yeah. But I didn't really have that because, again, Austin is like a salesperson. He's like
Networking.
everybody's friend. He's super networked. He knows everybody. He's had long relationships in New York and New Orleans. And so a lot of people who thought they were going to get invited didn't get invited, and they were really hurt by it. And I think it added insult to injury when they saw the videos and the photos, and that made it cut deeper. Because they got to watch it play out, and they also weren't
in
there
real time.
And people were like, oh man, this wedding was so good, and they weren't invited, and they thought they were like really closer than that. And here's the crazy thing, they probably were. He just didn't
have the capacity.
He didn't have the capacity.
Let me tell you, people don't understand until they're in that situation, because when people are not in that situation, they're always the guests. Not until you become the couple, then you're like, oh my God, I see why you just cannot invite. I had that conversation where I'm like, I know if you could, we would. And it really wasn't that we couldn't. We were limited into a space, because we had even talked about moving it outside of that location. So I did a whole draw up, like, okay, maybe we can get this area, contact the city park to try to see if we can get a larger space. Ultimately, it wasn't what we wanted at the end of the day, and it didn't really make sense to do it. I think the whole transition from Noma to the sculpture, it
the
was
garden theme.
Like, you didn't even know the tent was there. Like, you just literally walked and stumbled upon it. Is the way that it built out for them. And I think we wouldn't have gotten that if we would have
moved it,
which we considered. We did consider, but it didn't work. It just was not.
Yeah.
No.
And you had to be like a certain amount of space away from the
sculptures, the art.
And so even though we could have did a bigger tent, it would have to be somewhere else. And so we were limited with that tent size where we were, which is why we were like, okay, we're going to throw this big party afterwards.
That's why we did that.
Actually invite people
That's
that
what we
couldn't
did.
invite to the dinner. But people were offended
Oh, okay, can come to
that they didn't get invited to the dinner. Now, some people weren't. They were like, thank you.
Out
Like,
there.
we're up in there. You know what I mean? Thank you for inviting me to the
Maybe I'm jumping ahead, so I'm not gonna go too far into it. But the party was, oh my gosh! Again, when Savitra throws an event, she throws an event, and it's not like she don't have like the local like young lady who is 12 who sings really great come out to like do anything. You look up and it's like, is that Juvenile? Like, you look up and you like, is that? So the party would have definitely been worse.
But people didn't know.
They didn't know.
So they thought they just gonna come. So I will say, like, I went to a wedding where the bride had a seated dinner, but she also could not fit enough people there. So she invited people to like a after kickback. And it was literally a kickback. Like, people were just like sitting around hanging out. And so as people were coming, the party, everybody else was going. But I'm like, y'all don't realize, like, the party is going to be equivalent to some people's receptions. Like, but I don't think people just kept thinking like, oh, they're not getting invited to the wedding. And we literally were trying to build out the wedding to be able to invite more people. That's why people was like, you must have like 400 people. I was like, no, we just invited more people to the party part of it. So they were able to like, come and enjoy and drink and do all the things. But I don't think people that we invited who got offended by it, they felt like, oh, it was an afterthought. When no, like
It was intentional.
the party was like very much so a party. You know what I mean?
When you were gonna, it was
Yeah,
amazing.
Party.
We went all out for it.
Yeah, I mean the dinner itself was literally a dinner, the formal dances, that's it. So you really, not in a bad way. I mean, it was beautiful, it was nice, but 9 times out of 10 you're going to, consume some drinks, have a good time, socialize. That's the party. That
Right.
that's where people really have the most fun at weddings. Do people really enjoy sitting down eating dinner with people that they don't know?
Yeah.
No, not as much. So you really didn't miss as much as they thought that they did, because in a nutshell, that after party was everything from
Yes,
the
it
moment
was.
they left that tent until they got back into the space where we had the cocktail hour. That was the party, and very intentional from entertainment, very intentional for DJ, like very spot on intentional. And I don't think we stopped. I mean, from the time we walked in until they walked out that door,
Yeah.
people were there. I don't, normally weddings they drift off and people fall off. No, but that's how I do my events, period. And I think
Yeah.
I'm big on, like Savitra, I'm big on experiences. Yes, it's your experience, but yes, experiences. Because if you ever talk to people that go to a wedding, they're going to find something wrong with everything. So guest experiences from the moment you step foot at my wedding to the end is important. And you don't want to lose people along the way. You will, your older ones for sure. But for the most part, you don't want to lose people and you have those dry moments. So I like to build. And I think we talked about
Yeah.
that, like building on to the, you just never knew what was going to happen at that wedding.
Yeah.
Let alone none of
That-
my weddings, but that one specifically, like you never knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
They went to the church ceremony. We did that. It came out. Then people did not know that St. Aug's band was going to be out there, waiting for them. I mean, that's something you see on TV. The Royals, like it literally was giving that, and so that that moment happened, and then they go to Noma, and so then you have that cocktail hour. You were not expecting a full life tree in the middle of a museum, those kind of things. And you had that moment. I think we kept it very simple. We didn't put too much there in terms of like giving you too much, but you had enough to be like, wow. And then you went to dinner. That was a whole different experience. So it just kept building. It never was like, it kept guests wondering, like, what's next? I wonder what's going to happen
Yeah.
next.
Where you're not getting bored from one thing
Yeah.
to the next. And it just flowed. Hopefully, you were a guest.
You were,
tell me.
so you can let us know.
It was amazing.
Okay.
And so, to this day, I still say not close to anything else. The best wedding I've ever been to. Like,
Well,
hands down.
That was the goal.
experience that we wanted people to have. And, it was my idea to throw performances. And so I would say this about Ace. She was the wedding planner, the booking agent.
That was everything.
She was everything.
That is, and that's
we had
the
so many
false
performances.
But that's the false reality of a wedding planner. They tend to think that the wedding planner is just the wedding planner. Okay, you maybe not even doing decorating, because sometimes people get a decorator. So it's great when you get a gem of someone that can wear the many hats. But you are the planner, the strategist, the therapist, the everything.
Yes,
The
yes.
investment coach. You are producing, those sort of things. And so, I had to deal with talent and speak with talent. Yes, that's what they wanted. And trying to get in touch with talent is not easy.
Yeah.
So, navigating that world, their expectations, their riders, what they want, what they expect. Once the client book them, they're not thinking about what we have to have ready for
Right.
them, the music.
And then you need them to be there on time.
To
you
be
need
there.
them to make their flights.
to be the flights on time, travel. I mean, we had a videographer. He wasn't even local to the state.
Yeah.
So that was a
He
whole
came
nother.
from Italy.
He came from Italy.
Our
So,
videographer.
yeah, so all those kind of things go into place. But I mean, it's not limited to that. May not be the case, but we're not just booking locals. We may book people to come in from out of town. So I, yes, I'm managing them for the day, but I'm managing so many other people,
Yeah.
making sure they're showing up where they need to be. And I'm going to make sure you show where you need to be. So you're going to be here well in advance of what you need to be. But that's just the importance. And so that's why it's so important that depending on the type of event, I may not be the planner that you need, but if you're having an event at that scale, you need to have someone that has the experience to produce at that scale. And that makes the difference. Like you have to be able to produce. And that's something you cannot wing at all and try to figure like, oh yeah, I can do it.
Yeah.
You-
So one other thing to being grown when you get married and older is that the quality of your gifts, I feel like, go up because people have a little bit more money, to spend on you. And so you often hear people say, oh, take that money and spend it on a nice honeymoon. Well, I had saw like one of my friends like years ago had created I forget the website that you use for this, but it's basically a website that you can add items to it. And so essentially our honeymoon became our wedding registry. And so we had like 2 plane tickets to this. Pay for one night stay here, pay for our dinner here. So like little items from like $25 to items that were a couple $100s. And I went into it thinking, oh, maybe we'll get like a fourth of our honeymoon paid for,
What's fully paid?
fully paid.
Plus some, plus spending.
Well, when I tell you, and then Ace introduced us to our travel agent who planned everything like luxury honeymoon, Southeast Asia. We went to Singapore, Bangkok, Bali. We stayed at 5-star hotels. We flew business class. When I tell you, when people went on the wedding day, people went back and bought more stuff. To the point after the wedding, people were trying to go because some people don't buy a gift like they think about it later. People were texting us, hey, I don't see anything left on your wedding registry. So we were just going and just
adding stuff.
Like it was gone. People were like, here, we just gonna Zelle you some money.
Yeah.
And when I tell you our honeymoon, people spent close to $50,000, like pay for a whole honeymoon. And one, because, it's like our people and, they got money to spend. But also because they had a good time.
They
and
had
they
a
were like,
time.
I should have paid for this experience.
They
Like,
literally
the fact that I did not have to pay for this experience is crazy in my head.
That was actually really smart. It's kind of like if instead of, maybe for an analogy, when you have a baby and the baby shower, say, hey, instead of buying me, Pampers or clothes that the baby's going to outgrow in a few months, instead, put that money towards the college fund. Or so it was
investment.
So an investment. So it's kind of the same. It's like instead of bringing me pots and pans, put that money towards, our honeymoon.
Picked our honeymoon, right? Yeah. And so it was just like people were just so happy to do it. You know what I mean? They was like, this is the least I could do for being able to just like experience the moment with you all, and for you all to be so thoughtful about the experience that you gave us. And so our whole honeymoon was paid for.
When I put my part in, that was before the wedding, so it was before the experience. But I think for me, when I saw it, it was very different. So I was interested from the fact that like their registry wasn't, again, full of pots and pans. And
we only know pots and pans.
I mean, that too.
Oldest.
But I'm just saying that for me, it was more just of the fact that it was very different. I was just interested in the fact that like, oh, they're not asking for like your average or normal, wedding registry. They're saying, hey, you can pay for our meal on our honeymoon, or you can pay for. And I was like, that's much smarter because like
from the smallest gift, like $15 breakfast somewhere,
I thought that was actually extremely smart the way that you did that.
Yeah. And so I would say like of all the things, like the little things, like that one blew me. I mean, everything kind of blew me away when it all came together. But that was also one of the things I would tell like and other people have done it. And they were like, we ain't get as much as you, Savitra. I was like, hey, our friends was putting up a little bit more.
Put up a little bit more. It's a different.
It was
thing.
different.
It's different. It's just different, And I think, like you say, experience. They had experience. The individuals that wanted to do it, they truly did it because they wanted to do it. And it's priceless. Experiences are priceless. We do weddings, baby showers. It's usually like cookie cutter the same. And so I pride myself to make sure that we don't give that. I want people to be like, can we do this again? maybe we don't have to do all the planning, but can we just do that part again? Just show up and get there. And I think that's what you want to leave. And when you're investing that money, you want to make sure that if you're investing and spending that kind of money, that there is no regret, left on the table. Like, I did it. It was great. I guess we're, you know, appreciative of that moment, and we are as well. And it's a memory that you just really will not forget. So that's why you don't get no redos in this, like,
Yes.
at all. Like, you don't get no redos on no mishaps at anyone's wedding. So that's why I personally built my brand the way that it is. I didn't throw them onto another associate planner on my team to communicate
Yeah.
with them for anything. I
Mhm.
touched everything. I knew what was supposed to happen. So it didn't leave any loopholes. And then when you tend to have that, nothing against those that do, but oftentimes that can happen. And so the way I showed up for you the day of to get you as a client, I'm gonna show up for you, God forbid, like if something happens to me and I can't. But even so, like, I remember a wedding, literally, I gave birth to my son 2 weeks before these. I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? Like, that was what's on my mind. I just had a baby, but that
Yeah.
was what was on my mind. Like, I have to be there. Like, stitches and all, I
Yes.
gotta be there. But, I mean, they totally, understood the process. And I remember speaking to them. They're just calling me just regular. They're like, where are you in the hospital? I'm like, yeah, I had the baby. It's like, had the baby, but they were very, happy. But I think all those things matter. And I think you just have to make sure the individual that you bring on has your best interests at heart. At the end of the day, my clients are first. Yes, I have my vendors. I love my vendors. But at the end of the day, I need my clients to be comfortable, because that's the referrals. That's
Mhm.
the individuals that are coming. Like, she was at her line sister's wedding, and here go. And so for me, that's what my branding and stuff come about,
Mhm.
by
Well,
experiences, like what that
because
moment was like.
this podcast is about rich lessons, so I'm gonna throw a few questions at you,
Don't-
so that when people are watching this, also when we play this back, we have to include some photos, because I know people are watching this.
Like some
We got
pop-up
some
photos.
We gotta see this
We have to
wedding.
see.
Yeah.
Get
We
some
want to share a lot
video.
of our footage, like,
No, we
not
didn't.
for real, for real.
We have not
Look
shared.
at that.
Okay.
Exclusive to the Rich Lessons
A
podcast.
little bit, not a
Yeah,
lot.
not what we could have showed.
Yeah.
As a wedding planner, for someone who is looking for a wedding, whether it's a large budget or a small budget, what, as a bride or as a couple, what are some things they should be coming to the table with when they're going to look for a wedding planner?
They should come to the table of what they want. Everybody should know. People say, I don't know. You do. You know what you want. You know what you want to be. You know what you like. You know what you don't like. So I think that coming to the table, they need to really fully be prepared and understand at any way, but also understand that if you can't work with a particular person, that has nothing to do with you, because there are individuals that can give you exactly what you want. So you shouldn't see that as a less than moment. But just be smart about the decisions that you make, because you may have to pay for that. I've had individuals that have fired planners. Thank God I have never been. But sometimes you may invest your money incorrectly, and then now that's more money you have to spend to fix it. So just be mindful. I always tell my clients, I may not be the client for you, but if I'm not, I would love to be. But just be mindful, whoever you hire, that you trust that person, and that you know that that person has your best interest. So I think that's the wise decision to make. But I also think that's the way you need to go into the situation, is being mindful of what you're doing, because it is a big undertaking. It doesn't matter. 75, 200 plus thousand, it doesn't matter. It's your money, and nobody wants to waste any investment.
In all of your years,
Mhm.
you've done this, and you've done an amazing job, because I attended one of the weddings that you helped put together. Biggest mistake that you've seen from the couple side coming into planning a wedding, working with a wedding planner. What's like one of the biggest mistakes you would tell someone in advance so they don't make it?
Not investing in the couple.
Hmm.
Not investing in a couple.
Yeah.
I think we've had that conversation. I don't care about any of this. I need to make sure you two are good.
Mhm.
So I think investing in your relationship at the end of the day, because this is one day, that marriage is forever. So I think the biggest mistake couples do not do is not invest into the marriage, the couple, the relationship. You're going to grow. You're going to change. You're not marrying the same person today It's not going to be the same person in 10 years. So definitely invest in that along the way, whether it's a spiritual advisor, a counselor, or whomever. And that doesn't mean just because you have that there's an issue, but these are processes that can help you grow because marriage is new. You don't know anything about it, and it shouldn't be work at all. And I'm not just going to say it's easy because it's changing, but it should be good work. It should be a good effort. So definitely invest in that. And I think if that foundation is solid, then everything else will fall into place. That's my tip-in.
Absolutely. That's a very rich lesson for everyone, for sure. Make sure that the money you spend on your wedding, you look in those memories 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the road and still smiling and, appreciating those moments and each other. So as we begin to wrap it up,
Yes, ma'am.
what are you working on? What are your plans for the future? How can people reach you? Kind of give us the rundown.
A little
on
rundown.
what's coming up.
So new coming up. So we just launched, and it's not really launched, but we've added to our brand florals. So now I'm doing in-house florals for my clients. So before we would utilize other florists, nothing against those, but this gives us more creative RAM to get things done. For example, Savitra's wedding, we had to bring in 2 different florists, completely unheard of. That's not normal. Everybody wants exclusivity. But we were able to get it done. So now just not having that limit boundary on my aesthetic for the couple. So that's new for us. So stay tuned. This fall you'll see a lot of that coming about. And then we're everywhere. We're on the web, we're on social media. I try to be a good social media person, but life is busy sometimes. It's hard to stay on top of social media. So just because you don't see any posting does not mean no work is being done, because a lot of work is being done. But when we do post, we definitely give good content and great things. So Elegance by Ace online. Ace Florals is our new baby that we're working with. So stay tuned. And congratulations to you guys on season 2. So thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, Ace. It's been a pleasure. This has been amazing.
It's been amazing.
That's it for this week's Rich Lessons.